Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you again for continuing to join us for these Wednesday evening devotions. I hope this is helping you in this time that we are apart. I hope this is helping to alleviate that feeling of isolation we're all feeling, and helping to encourage you in your own devotions throughout the week. This Wednesday, once again, I want to continue to make use of this new initiative from the conference of sharing different voices. I think there's a lot of power, like I said last week, in hearing other voices at this time to alleviate this feeling of isolation, this feeling like we're battling this alone. To hear encouragement from many different people and perspectives, especially this week following our newsletter. It's great to have the perspectives of two powerful women of faith. Today we're going to hear a video from Reverend Laurie Kantonen, I'm hoping. She's the district superintendent for the North Star District. And Reverend Rebecca Trefz, and she is the director of Connectional Ministries for the Dakota Conferences. This video is a little bit disjointed, maybe, but I really liked it. This is actually the last video in a discussion series they did on a book for Lent this year. But the final chapter is on emulating Christ. So that's fitting in really well with what we're talking about. More than that, I really like this video because I feel like it honed in on a couple of really important ideas, really important things to note when we're talking about following Christ, emulating Christ, living as examples for Christ. This understanding that this isn't something we can do on our own. Becoming more like Christ is the transformative work of the Holy Spirit. Something that we will and work on, but is only done through the power of God. And that's a very important point, I think, that I've been missing in my messages. As well as that this isn't something we can do now and then. We can't choose when we're going to emulate Christ, when we're going to follow Christ, and when we're going to follow our own desires. That following Christ is a lifelong commitment, something we have to practice all the time. So now that I guess that I stole their thunder a little bit, I would like to introduce Laurie and Rebecca as they share their reflections on imitating Christ.
Well, we get to talk about the last chapter, chapter 6, where we end the acronym with Emulate Christ. And as I read this chapter, it just really felt like we were able to kind of bring everything together in the fact that we don't turn on and off how we follow Christ, that it really needs to become a lifestyle, that it is a discipleship that takes over our life. And as I was reading this chapter, I couldn't help think of a woman that I've never actually met, but she really had a profound impact on how I think about discipleship. She was the sister of a woman that was in one of my Bible studies. And this sister was born with some kind of lifelong condition that created a lot of pain for her, and she spent a lot of time in the hospital. And we used to pray for her a lot at Bible study. And then at one study, my friend came and said, my sister has asked that we not pray for her to stay out of the hospital anymore because that is her ministry. And she was able to take the fact that she had to be in the hospital so often and that she experienced so much pain. She was able to take that and really turn it into a ministry. She said, every single time I'm in the hospital, I meet people that I can encourage, that I can share the love of Christ with. And so I don't see that as a burden anymore. I see it as a blessing. And I just thought, if somebody who is living like that can do that, then what can I do in my life to make every day the opportunity to be a blessing rather than to see something that I'm facing as a burden? To really turn it into a blessing.
Yeah, that idea of transformation, really, it sounds like that happened in her life and her heart. And I think that, like you talked about, that this is something that's our whole being and our whole life. It isn't something that we turn off or do when it's easier, when we sort of enact our will to do it. I think one of the things that came to mind for me was the idea of, it kind of dawned on me when I was reading it, that, love is the first fruit of the Spirit. And just that sense, of what does that look like to understand that I can't be loving, I can't be like Jesus just out of my own deciding determination to do it. I mean, there are things that I can do that hopefully become means of grace that help me become more like Jesus, but that idea that it really needs to be the Holy Spirit transforming my heart so that love is the fruit that is produced out of it at all times, in all situations. Which isn't always easy to do. In a lot of cases.
A lot of it is letting go, I think. Inviting God in and letting go of control. And the other thing that I thought of as I read this was, I think so often we talk about how are we radically countercultural in the church. And to me, love is the area where we can be radically countercultural when we live in a culture right now that is so divided, that is so polarized, and there's so much more shouting than listening. To choose every day to allow the Holy Spirit to enter us and to let Christ's love shine through us. So that we do listen, so that we do love, so that we do serve, as he talks about, is such an opportunity for us to really present to the world a very different way of living.
I love that you bring up that idea of countercultural, because to me, when I was reading, especially when he was talking about sacrifice, and it's so that sense of dying to ourselves and what we need and want first and foremost is so countercultural.
It is.
And it's often sometimes put down, or, oh, why would you, give up what you want or whatever you need to. And yet there's something freeing about letting go of that.
There is.
And there's something in that that idea that really is different than looking at any side of any argument or situation, and to say, part of is letting go and dying to what I need so that I can really embody a different way of being.
Yes.
And that looks really different in the world.
Yes. And I'm glad you brought up the fruits of the Spirit, because I think when we lay down our needing to get what we want or what we need or what we think we deserve all the time, we actually open the door to joy. And so it kind of is counterintuitive. A lot of times I think we think of sacrifice and we think of sorrow. But oftentimes sacrifice can actually lead to joy.
Bring that greatest joy.
Yes.
And I feel like we're segueing into a sermon series on the fruits of the Spirit. So people that want to move into that after Lent, we're really setting up this. Because then to sort of take the next step for me is, you're thinking about, when Jesus was talking in the Gospel of John in that final sermon of, a new commandment I give you, love as I love. And he also says in that, my peace I give you. And that there's also something that, we've been talking a lot about fear, and that our culture is so fear-driven right now. And yet we know that there is no fear in love. And so if you think about not only taking out the fear, is love casts out the fear, and that is what brings in the peace. And that you really begin to, those fruits of just a sense of peace that goes beyond human understanding is what people experience and encounter through us. And that is, again, that's not in this situation, I'm going to just choose to be a non-anxious presence. But it's something that exudes, in the same way you talk about that joy that exudes even in hardships, even from people that you think, how could you be happy or joyful when so many things have gone wrong?
Right.
And that it
Right.
it really does set up a different way of being in the world.
Right.
And looking at things.
Right. One of the other things that I really appreciated in this book was when he talked about being responsible for your own wake. Because I do think we get a little bit overwhelmed with the idea of transformation and living a Christ-like life every day. So I have a friend that always says, when I feel overwhelmed by what I feel called to do, I remember that I can keep my side of the street clean. I can't always control what's going to happen on the other side of the street, but I can keep my side of the street clean. And I thought that was really what he was saying with being responsible for your own wake.
Yeah.
And I liked that, but I liked the fact that he didn't leave it with just not doing any harm, but actually wanting to make sure that you leave this trail of good in your life as well.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that he says kind of what you were saying at the beginning too. We don't just do that on our own. We don't just decide moment on moment and moment that we're going to do something good here and do something good there. But it actually has to be a transforming work of the Holy Spirit in our life, working through us to be a blessing.
Yeah, I think that idea of really taking responsibility and that we participate and open and make ourselves available to God to work in, that really is about what we're kind of want to leave people with today, is some things to do. And even as you were describing that situation, I thought of the quote that says, "What we are filled up with is what will spill out when we're bumped."
Oh.
And so if we're filled up with angst or irritation or stress, if we're bumped and life bumps us, something doesn't go right, and that's what will spill out on the people around us. But if we're filled up with love, then when we're bumped, that's what's going to spill out. And that's what people are going to experience. And so I think as we think about how do we take action steps towards emulating Christ, it's to first be filled up with love. Right. And that means really asking, do I believe that I am beloved, that I am worthy of love and belonging? Right. And I mean, that's sometimes that's just some initial work. Sometimes that's hard, deep soul work, because life in different situations has told me in different ways that I'm not.
Right. Sometimes that's the biggest step.
Yes, exactly. And so that we can clear out what's ever getting in the way of experience of fullness of love in our own lives. And then asking ourselves, once we know that we are beloved and we can see ourselves with Christ's eyes, then how do we look at every person and approach every person with, in you is the image of God. Whatever else might be marred, and you're doing the best you can, and so I want to see Christ in you, and I want you to experience Christ in me, even if you're bumping me all over the place. Yeah. I want to spill out love onto you.
Right.
And then I think it's to go forth then and really say, how can I be eager? When they're talking about that sports team of not just I want, to sacrifice that, but how can I be eager?
Right.
That somebody might encounter Jesus through me today, just through something I say or do or really react or respond.
Right.
They might find a new way that is countercultural, that they don't see in the rest of the world around them, that they don't just see in good, nice people, but they say something is different. And we know that's because we have become a vessel for the Holy Spirit, and those fruits of love and joy and peace and patience, all that is spilling out into their lives, and they can experience the goodness and the taste of God that we have. Yeah. Thanks for talking. This was a great conversation.
It was.